Okay, welcome everyone. Oops, sorry that that was blurry. I think I went too close to the camera when I was sort of adjusting. So we are using 9 by 12 paper. You can also use 8.5 by 11 or something, close to that size. And it is landscape mode. So we are going to get started. I also recommend having either a tortillon or, this is called it's a blending stump. If you don't have that, you can use a Q-tip. That's also um, very useful. So we're going to get started with our shape of our bird. But before we do that, we're going to create the actual tree branch first. And I'm just gonna make sure everybody is muted just because we are recording. All right. So we're going to start off with our branch here, and we're going to start down towards the bottom of our paper, but not at the exact bottom. So probably, well, more than probably like 3/4 of the way down. And I'm just going to adjust my camera one more time because I realize you can't see the other side. There we go. So our branch starts off and it sort of bends just a little bit going downward and then kind of evens out again. Oh, yeah, you can take a picture. Absolutely. It's a good idea, Debbie. So I'm going to hold this up in case anyone wants to take a picture. It's always a good idea. All right. Let me know if you did not get it, Debbie, and then I'll do that again. Okay, so we're just going to go straight across. You're welcome. Yeah, it's very helpful to have that image if you are on your computer, or you're on. I use a laptop, and I'm going to kind of put it right above. It's always helpful to have the image as we're drawing. So we go straight across. We're going to kind of double it up here at the bottom. And we're doing the basic shape at first. And then we're going to go back and we're going to, this is landscape, Debbie. That was a good question. Yep, so we're in landscape mode. So here's our basic shape of our branch here. And now we're going to add this little bump here over on the left. So we're going to create the actual shading first. And in case anybody has pencils like the art pencils, we are using a number 2 pencil, which is an HB. So if you have a different array of the different pencils, I would use an HB if you have it. And if you don't have an HB, as in boy, you could also use a B, as in boy. So it's really the first, sort of the first one, the first pencil, the first lighter pencil. Okay, so we also have a bump down here. And so we're going to add that in. And as you see, as I add it in, I sort of erase where it's connected. And then we're going to start to make the shading. And then we'll go back and make parts of it a little darker. So in order to create the shading, we're going to use the side of our pencil. And this is where we're going to be, after adding in the shading, we're going to be then using our blending stump. And so we want this to look like wood, you know, the wood grain. And so we're going to start off at the top and shade using the side of our pencil. And we're going to do the same inside the bottom portion. So we're shading that so that we can then go back and use our tortillon or blending stump or Q-tip, what have you. So again, we lay down shading across the top and across the bottom. And then we're going to very carefully create lines to make it look like it's the wood grain. And so I tend to go across with my lines and use a little bit of almost like a dotted line. Now you can also go in and create some shapes to make it look like wood grain by kind of making a curved or pointed half circle like that. Now again, we're going to be softening these lines up afterward. And then we're going to be drawing on top of them to create some darker shades. So continue to fill up that space so it will look like the grain. And then when you're ready, you're going to grab your shading instrument and we're going to soften all of those lines so that we get a nice gray. And then we're going to be going back and using our eraser to actually erase away and add some lightness. We're going to be doing this also with the bird, which has now become the black-capped chickadee. I love that. I'm going to be looking that bird, looking up that bird. We have two larger sort of bushes out in our front, in front of our townhouse, and birds love to perch there. I can hear them, especially in the summer and the spring, in the mornings. And sometimes I try to get up and look, even if it's, 4:30 a.m. I can hear them. Okay, so you should be now having something that looks like it's all gray with a little bit of lightened areas because of in between doing the pencil marks. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take our eraser and we're actually going to start to lift up some of the lighter parts. And so I'm going to show this up close so that you can see. So for instance, here, what I've done is used my pencil or my eraser, sorry, to erase lines, white lines in it. And then what we'll do is we'll go back, we'll create some darker areas, like right here and here, always along the edge. So we're going to start off first though, using our eraser. So let's do that. And I'm going to go in a little bit closer so you can see that. All right, so I'm using the side of the eraser as well because there's a little bit of an edge to it. And I'm just going to start taking away little bits of it. And this is also going to help create that texture. So you can go in a straight line, sort of what we were doing before with our pencil, but then you can also go back and create the wood grain as I was also mentioning before, by using your eraser as a pencil and creating lighter parts. And keep going till you have the whole thing. I like to make it a little bit lighter here on the edge toward the right side. You can also use, if you have a kneaded eraser, these gray erasers, you can also use one of those, and you can actually, mold it to create sort of a point and kind of lift off the graphite as well. But I tend to like the pink eraser on the end of a regular #2 pencil because kind of gets a lot of lifting very easily. Okay, so now that we have that, we're now going to go back in and we're going to do a little bit of outlining, making it a little bit darker. And again, for those that are using art pencils, you could still use the same pencil. You're just going to go a bit darker. Where you will change is when we get to the bird. And again, for, this can all still be done with a regular #2 pencil, but definitely having art pencils with different, with different um, variations makes it a little bit easier. So we will be erasing a part of the section of the twig when we get to adding our bird. And so I'm kind of leaving a space here for our chickadee, but may have to expand that space, and that's okay. So just go all the way across. And then once you do that, we're just going to add a little bit of some dark shading up top, going all the way across. We have this little bump, sort of a growth coming out of the tree here. So we can shade a little bit underneath it as it's lifting up. And then we're going to do the same thing at the bottom as far as outlining. So you're going to outline the shape. Now, when we get to this part here, this bump, we're going to be doing a little bit more detail. So we're going to add a curved line here. And then on the other side, another curved line here. Give everybody a chance to do that. And then we'll continue with our dark outer line all the way across. You can add some bumps as you're going. They can be some little bumps. There is a bigger bump here. And again, if it doesn't look exactly like mine, that's okay. And then we finish off going across like so. I'll wait for everyone to catch up, and then we're going to add in some more darks. So we have some dark shading here, 2 spots of it, and a little bit of a medium sort of shading on the top part here. And then we're going to get really dark at the bottom. So more like a kind of a charcoal gray, a dark charcoal gray. And that's going to be going across. And then it gets a little bit lighter as we get across, all the way across the paper. Now you can go back and smooth this out a little bit when you're ready. Blend that in a little bit. Okay, and then you do still want to make sure though, go back in and create a darker outline so that it looks nice and finished. Okay. I'm going to now raise the camera because we're going to start on our bird. So you do want to be careful. It's very easy to smudge. If you would like to get another piece of paper to kind of, put your hand on top of, you can either rip off a little piece of paper. I think I'm going to go grab one as well. Sometimes when I'm doing drawings like this, I haven't done a drawing like this in a very long time, but I use tracing paper so that I can still sort of see what I'm doing. But not everybody has tracing paper. So a little piece of, even just a little corner piece of paper, even a tissue would work. But I'm just going to grab a little piece of printer paper just for my, for my knuckle. I am definitely a leaner when it comes to drawing. So, this will help. Okay. But first I'm going to move it so that you can actually see where we're going to put our chickadee. So let me move this up. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to draw the basic shape of our winter bird. So I'm going to move this up So basically, here's the top of the paper. We definitely want to have space between the top of the paper and where we draw our bird, but our bird is pretty big. And I'm going to put this right here. And we'll get started, and we're going to create him a little bit to the right side of the paper. Just adjusting this for a second. Okay, so here's the top of my paper. I'm going to go down about maybe 2 to 3 inches. And we're going to create the shape of his head. And so his head is a little bit flatter than you would think. So it sort of comes, about right here. It goes back. Sort of like that shape. So we're going to draw a little bit of an outline of him. And this is, drawing very lightly. I'm drawing a little bit darker so you can see. We're going to add his beak in, just the basics of his beak. Oh, Beth B is coming on. Hi, Beth.
Hi, I don't know what happened, but
Oh,
my Wi-Fi, so
yeah. Oh, I'm glad that you got back on.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we're going to create right where, so have Kristen coming on. Hi, Kristen. Welcome. So we're now going to be creating the stripe. So this is also rather light. I'm calling it a stripe. So it's a little bit thinner right where his beak is. And then it's going to get a little bit wider towards the edge of him. And so we're creating the first part of his head. And I'm going to move my camera one more time so that you can really get a view of on top of his head here. So I apologize for fussing with that. All right. We're also going to make his eye now. So we're going to make the shape of his eye. All of this is very basic. Then we'll go back and we'll create the details. Okay, so as far as his eye is positioned, it's going to be right where the stripe is kind of bending. And we're going to make a little football shape for his eye. Actually, probably more like a Cleopatra, kind of like a Cleopatra eye. And we're just going to do that shape for now. Okay, and now we're going to start making the rest of his body. So coming back over underneath his beak is a bit of a curve. And then he gets fluffy. So he's going to get fluffy here. And then it's going to go down a little bit like so. And we're going to add his feet. So we go almost down to where he is perched. And I'm going to show a close up of his feet. And so what you're going to do is we're going to start off and make three very thin, um, his little claws. I couldn't think of it. I was thinking legs. It's not his legs. I mean, the whole thing is his leg, but his little claws here. So let's do that. Oh, John's coming back. That's good. And so what you're also going to do is you're going to take your eraser. Yeah, I guess there were talons, Debbie. I guess they are talons. I say claws. I think talons is probably the correct word. Thank you. So we're going to take away a little bit of the branch here and make sure that his talons, thank you to Debbie, are curved and gripping like so. And then we have the third one here. And then we make sure that we have a little bit of his actual leg showing there. And I'm going to go in really close. Okay. And then we've got all his fluff here at the bottom. We'll go back to that. And then we want to draw the rest of him, rest of his body up here. And we'll go back and create the other talon. So his body kind of starts to do a little bit, there's kind of like two bumps, very slight ones. And then we have his talon here, and it's facing a different direction because he's clipped on this way. And again, we have three. The middle one is a little bit longer in length. And we have his fur around it, which for now you can just create sort of scratchy strokes for it. We'll go back later on and add more detail to his fluff. But we can now work on his little talons once they are drawn. So what we want to do with these are we're actually going to take our tortillon, the shading stump, with some of the graphite on it. Now, if you don't have this and you're using a Q-tip, then you want to lightly fill in with your pencil. But we're going to use our tortillon that already has some of the gray on it. And then we're just going to lighten it up a little in the middle of each talon using our eraser. And then you can redraw the outline after you have lightened it up. And we're going to add some striping to each of the talons as well. So it's sort of a three-pronged process here. We add the shading, then we erase a bit I'm going really close so you can see. There's my little paper. Now as I mentioned, we sort of outline. Oop, my pencil point just broke. So I'm gonna just sharpen that real quickly. And now our next step is going to be adding a few of the lines to these talons. So very lightly, we're gonna add, do you see those really light lines? So we're gonna add some lines to make it look a little more realistic. I make them really light on the talon on the left. And then I do add a little bit of darker shading just right above where the fur is going to be on the right side. We'll come back to that. But we have our talons. And we are ready to go back up to our bird. So up goes my camera. Oh, up a little higher. Okay, so now we're going to start off at his head, obviously. And what we're going to do is, again, first we're going to use the side of our pencil. And what we're going to do is we're going to be using a sort of a medium shading. So again, for those, if you've got the pencils that are different, more than just the regular HB pencil, you can use a number 4B as in boy. But we're just going to go sort of lightly, but a little bit darker than the gray that we used down below. We're going to build up the color of this because we want texture to be in it as well, right? We want it to look like fur. So I'm showing that just to show you here. So we start off creating it medium, and then we're going to go back in and we're going to make parts of it darker. As you can see, I'm going from left to right, but kind of curving my strokes a little bit. Let me go a little bit further, or closer, I should say. And once you do that, you're going to then take your blending stump and you're going to blend. And then we're going to be adding and subtracting from this using, again, our eraser, and then making it a bit darker, going in with strokes of our pencil on top. So he should now have a grayish, sort of like a charcoal gray color to his head. We're going to create the eye as well. So we're going to take a break and go into the eye now that we have the basic background shading down. I'm going to go really close so that you can see his eye here. And so what we're going to do, so here is a close-up. So what we're going to do is we're going to start making the inside black, but it's not going to be completely black. It's going to be a little bit of a darker gray on the left side of the eye. And then as it goes around, it's going to get darker. And you see that we leave a bit of a white fleck right there. So you just won't color in that section of the paper. So let's get started with that. So we're going to go in and basically we're going to almost redraw a section of the dark part in order to make it. So it's almost like an eye within an eye. And then we're going to start shading, making sure that we leave the glint in his eye right at the top. And then you're going to start pressing darker to create the round part, the round sort of part of his eye in the center of that. So I just keep going around it and making it a little darker with my pencil. And then he has a little bit of some white surrounding his eye. And then as I was calling it, kind of like a Cleopatra eye, right? He has like a cat eye toward the edge over here. So I'm going to take a little trial and error with your pencil by erasing a little bit on the top and then redrawing top part of that eye so that there's a little bit of the white of the paper showing. Going to look a little funny right now because we haven't gone back and created the shading for around it, with the bird feathers, but we will do that. So that's our basic shape. We can go back later on as well, um, after we add more of the feathers so that it will blend a little better. But we're now going to go to his head, back to his head here. And we're going to start creating the layers of feathers on top of this. And so first what we want to do, so we're going to take the side of our eraser again, and we're going to create light strokes, curved strokes to make it look like fur. And we're going to do that towards sort of the top part of his head. So just a little bit there. And again, for those that are using other pencils, I know there's at least, I think it's Arlene is using, um, I think, the art pencils. You would switch now to one of your darker pencils, probably like either a 5 or a 6B, as in boy. Um, with us, we're going to get darker with our pencil. So we're going to start off back where the front of the head is. And we're going to create dark strokes on the edge of him. And we're going to create fur strokes. So we also want to make sure that he's got some fur sticking up here. And we're now going to start layering those strokes. And so you can see that I'm taking my pencil, going on top of the gray that we created, and that's going to act as a middle tone, right? And then we're going to go really dark, closer to the edge of his nose here. And so your strokes are going to be really dark and kind of piled on top of each other. And as we get towards the top of his head, we have to remember that, he has little tufts of hair, feathers really sticking up. And so we're going to make sure that we're doing that. So right now we're getting dark going towards his eye. And then we get a little bit lighter here in the middle. So what we're doing is we're still adding strokes, but we're relieving the pressure a little bit. And then we're going to get dark again towards this bottom section of his fur. Now, what we're also going to do toward the edge of where his black fur meets, or feathers meets, the white feathers, we're going to extend some strokes into the white. And that's going to make it look like that it's feathers. Let me show you the finished one so you see what I mean here. When we get to the edge here, we start to extend a little bit into the white. It's right here, and then we're going to do it also here, all around. So let's continue doing that. And I'm gonna put his head right there so you can see. And building up that value, making it really dark at the front. And then again, as we get to the top of his head, making some stray hairs. You can even color in a bit of the feathers right here going towards beak again to make it, darker. And then you can draw a little bit of an edge to the top of his head with your pencil. And then create the darker hairs again as you get to the back of his head. So it's all just building it up. We get in this middle section and we go a little bit lighter, but then we go darker towards where the white fur is happening. And this is where we're going to start to add little strokes into the white fur to build that up. And then again, going back to his eye, if you need to add a bit darker around his eye, you can do that. But we're going to start adding in, going towards the white fur. And so the way we do this is we do still add some very light strokes in the white fur. Here's some going this way. And we have some strokes over here going toward the right side. And then we have a little bit of a sort of a dark area. But again, we want to go toward the edge and make like little hairs kind of sticking out. Instead of having a straight line, we make little strokes for the fur sticking out. And then we're also going to go along the edge here and do the same. And that's going to take us to his beak, which I have to fix my beak a little bit. I feel like he looks like Elvis right here, like if Elvis was a bird. So with the beak, we're going to do the same thing that we did to use, you know, a little bit of that gray on the beak using our blending stump. So the top beak is a little lighter, but you can kind of use the you know, the gray. And then we're going to go back in with our eraser. And we're going to outline a bit of his beak. You know, it's a triangular shaped. And then in the middle, we have a very dark line. And we have a little shading here on the top part of his beak. So I'm showing this up close. So the part I'm talking about is here. And we're going to make the bottom portion of his beak a little bit darker. So now we're going to go back in And we also want to make sure to make a line here for the edge of his beak. Like so. And we're going to start on the darker fur in a second. Everybody's caught up. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to lift this up again. Yeah, I decided to forego using my piece of paper. So it's just going to get a little bit um, gray with gray spots, and we can just erase that later on. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into, oh, sorry about that. Let me fix my camera one more time. We're going to go into this area here. And so we'll draw it first, sort of like a kind of a triangular shape. Ooh, excuse me. And adding a little more to the back of his head here for the white part. But we're going to do the same thing that we did before, the top part. So we're going to add the gray. And then we're going to use our pencil and our mostly our pencil with this one, since he is darker underneath, sort of on his neck. And so we're going to start off and we're going to create really dark strokes again as you get toward the edge underneath where his beak is. You're going to make those little individual hairs, right, to make it look like fur. And I'm going to go in really close so that you can see that. We're also going to do that along the edge. We're curving a little to the left, and then you're going to change directions with your strokes, and you're going to curve down towards your right. So here, curving to the left, and then here to the right. And then we're going to get darker by adding individual strokes of fur closer to his beak. And then as we go up to the edge of, again, where the white starts, you're going to add some strokes of the feathers along the edge. And then building up that area with little strokes. And I like to sort of color it in a little bit darker right underneath where his beak is. Now we're going to go towards his body. And so with his body, so you can see that I've used the shading here using the blending stump. So we're going to start off doing that. So again, grab your blending stump. Okay, sounds good, Cindy. And we're going to make it a little bit blended along the edge here. We're actually going to blend out the shape of his body at first. Right, so we're going to soften that up. And then we're going to add some gray shading on the left side here, going down toward his left talon. And then we're going to add a little more shading, sort of in stripes. So this one here, and then we're going to go back and shade it again using our blending stump here. We're going to go back and make it look like more fur too, but for now we just want to get some strokes on there so that then we can go back and make them a little bit smooth. And you want to kind of take that shading in kind of round strokes his body, and then you'll get a little bit grayer toward where his feet are. So we're just going to build up a little bit of a medium tone. And then we're going to start using our pencil to create his fluff. So I'm just sharpening a little bit. So we're going to come over here on the left. I'm going to make sure that his little fluff above is sticking out. And now we're also going to start doing that, making it a little bit dark right here. And again, you know, some stray feathers on the outer edge. And then we're going to start making short little strokes. Right here, little buildup of feathers. And we also come in from the outer edge and we make strokes of the fur. So sticking up a little bit and then kind of coming into his white fur. And we're going to keep going along the edge here, using fine strokes as we go towards the bottom of his talon. And then now this is adding in some of the fur by going in different little sections, curving our pencil strokes here, making some darker, but we want to remember, this is fur, so it kind of has a curve to it. But then as we get down toward his feet, it gets a bit straighter. And we want to make sure to add some of his little fur down a little bit on top of the the wood, so that it looks realistic, right? So if we go a little bit darker in those areas right along the edge and a little bit on top of where his talon is, it still looks like white fur, but we're doing the kind of shading in the white fur. And we're going to go along the edge now here too and make him look a little more fluffy. He's a little more fluffy up top. And so again, right along the edge, we're making those lines a little bit wispy and making sure that it's not just a line, but making it look like feathers. See, here's a little chunk of a feather that's kind of going there. And make his talons a little bit darker. And then we create some more kind of layering here with our strokes as we get to the middle of his body. And then if you haven't created a little bit more of the dark fur underneath him and it going into the white fur, you can do a little more of that now. And then again, I like to add a little bit of a shadow underneath him on the twig here. And so shading it a little bit darker, right on the left side underneath where his fur is. And a little bit right there. And then just finishing off the a bit more, making it a little darker, him sitting on top of the tree here. I like to make it a little bit of a darker line. And then if anything has gotten, too dark in his white fur, you can also go back in using your eraser and going like this. And then any parts that are a little bit gray on the paper that, by smudging, you can go and erase those too. As far as his eye, making sure that, it's still, he still has the white part of his eye here. You can go back in. Oh, you're welcome. Make this just a little darker. So I'm going to remove my spotlight, and I will stop the recording. And if you would like to show your winter bird, I'd love to see it. So let me stop the recording.